Talk to me, Caleb.
Spoilers ahead for Top Gun.
Damn right. Welcome, everybody, to a mini episode of Screenwriters Rewatch ahead of our main review of Top Gun Maverick coming later this week. Today, I'm joined by Caleb to find out if Top Gun still feels the need for speed or if it crashed and burned into the script department aircraft hangar vaults.
Bow down, 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 down. Bow down.
Oh man, it's beautiful. Maybe we should just do that the whole time. I think.
Yeah, the whole episode. Like it's just gonna come back in.
Yeah,
and then go out.
Every now and again,
then come back in.
If I stop talking, if I'm talking, you do it. If you're talking, I'll do it, and then
yeah. That way we cover it. This is Oscar-winning Top Gun episode. Just so you know, this won best song for "Take My Breath Away."
I didn't know it won best song.
Yep. Wow. And it's also written by Giorgio Moroder, if that's how you pronounce his last name, who is a grandfather of the synth, I believe. And he was featured on track 3 of Daft Punk's Random Access album. If you haven't listened to that album, it is just god tier. But so that's a fun little fact for you.
I like that. I like that very, very much. Yeah. So there's some high musical pedigree here then.
He is if you look at his IMDb credits, he has over 400 musical scores composed or something. He's one of those names that you don't notice until you notice it, and then you're like, oh my god, he's done everything.
That guy, yeah.
So I just thought I looked that up, because I was gonna listen to the song to do that bit, but I looked that up before we started, and I was like, oh, of course he did that song. Yeah,
of course he did. Yeah.
So,
I love that. Yeah. So tell me then. So Caleb, Top Gun, we're coming to. We've obviously got a new a sequel, Top Gun Maverick. Which is out in cinemas now. We've both seen it, I think. Have you seen? You've seen that one, haven't you? The sequel, yeah,
I did.
Well, we're not going to talk about that. That's for later in the week. Well, but for the original Top Gun, how are you feeling about it? What are your impressions?
So this is one of my blind spots. For some reason,
no way.
I have no idea. Yeah, no, I had never seen it.
Wow.
I knew, the Goose stuff, Goose. I knew that. So I knew that was coming. And then I knew a couple other beats. I had watched Hot Shots growing up, so I knew that influence on the spoofing of that, the lampooning. But yeah, so that's I watched it for this episode, actually. So coming fresh into it. But there is one thing that I find interesting, and we can get into it a little bit, but it's not, it doesn't really have to pertain to it too much. But I also watched the night before this, Good Morning Vietnam for the first time.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And those movies are 1 year apart, and they couldn't be more different from one another. One is borderline propaganda in a way for the U.S. military. The other is an anti-war film. That's but so that is a great double bill if anyone is looking to do a fun, interesting back-to-back movies. But so
that's great. I've never thought of that. The those comparisons are really stark. Maybe we'll pick up Good Morning Vietnam at some point on this show as well. We can have a look at that, because that would be.
I really enjoyed that.
That would be very interesting. Oh, it's great, isn't it? But we're not here to talk about that.
We're
here to talk about Top Gun. We're here to talk about planes and sweaty men and all of
volleyball.
That. And volleyball and
beach.
God, so much sweating. So much sweating. They do not stop. And Val Kilmer just rolling his eyes consistently at Tom Cruise. All of this stuff. It is
being icy.
Yeah. It is, I think, of all 80s films, it is perhaps the most 80s film.
Possibly, yeah.
It's so much of its time, and I think it's a weird it's a weird one to kind of try and critique from a modern standpoint, because it's a, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot in it that I grew up watching this. I loved it. This, you have those films that when you're ill, when you're sick and you're off school,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
this was one of mine. I had and I'd forgotten it was one of mine until I actually picked it up to watch it for this, and I went, oh, I know this so well. It was like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Top Gun, Indiana Jones, that kind of stuff, Back to the Future. But like it is. It's so 80s, and it's difficult to separate that. I think there is kind of a sheen of 80s cheese over the top of this film, which I struggled with a little bit. I kind of was, which seems really unfair, because how can you criticize something for being made in the time it was? I don't know. What did you find the 80s? Because I mean, first time watcher, right? So did you find the 80s cheese sheen distracting?
Yes, yeah, and I'm used to 80s movies. This was not this was a outlier within my 80s blind spots, of course. So like yeah, so it definitely felt very cheesy. The music cues, the editing, which I think it was nominated for best editing. But yeah, so and to talk about it story wise, it's very cheesy in terms of story, because there's not much going on within this. No. Which is fine. Like, I don't think I think it makes sense given the like you were saying, how it's the product of its time, so it makes sense in that way. But yeah, looking back at it as we're rewatching, yeah, it definitely stands out to me for sure. So
I think the dialogue in particular, for me, that it's not, well, I can do a double header here actually, because it's structurally, it's not doing anything particularly revolutionary. In terms of dialogue, it's not doing anything particularly revolutionary. This is a visual movie. And in terms of the script, there's just not a whole lot to kind of really discuss there, I don't think, in terms of like revolutionary stuff. Though what I would say is, from a to contradict myself slightly there, from a structural point of view, it's very nice. You're told constantly throughout this film, this is dangerous. What they're doing is dangerous. All of this flying around is dangerous. Guys, it's dangerous. But you don't ever believe it, because everybody always gets away until suddenly they don't. And we've done our spoilers. The death of Goose does cut through the kind of the happy-go-lucky feel for the film, and is so jarring in a good way. I think it really does. How did you find that? How did you find that, knowing it was going to happen?
Yeah, so knowing it was going to happen, I wish I didn't, because I think it would have been really effective. Like, so I think trying to separate myself from that spoiler and taking in the movie as like fresh as possible, I feel like it is effective. It does, the way that it's executed is a little confusing. Of like, okay, what happened? How did he hit his head, or what's going on? Why is he bloody? But in terms of like that story beat, I really like it. I think that there's a lot of stuff, like you said, where we're told in this movie. We're told kind of through dialogue, and that's some of the cheesy dialogue of like, oh, don't talk about my past, man, or like like it's like very it's that vague, like kind of built in, like like, oh, he's got demons. Yeah. Like like, I've got no one in my life, man. And like, so there's that type of stuff that goes on. But I think without the Goose beat, it doesn't become effective. Like all of the other stuff within Tom Cruise's character, Maverick's character, becomes like weighty because of Goose, because you're like, oh man, the one person he did have is now gone, and now he's become like this tragic character. Even though it has that 80s like it ends happy, like even in terms of the sequel, like from the trailers you can tell like this is going to be about the
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it, it is one of those things. I think the performances of this are better than the film deserves, if that makes sense. Like because the I think it's the performances that really hold this together. That whole sequence of again, Goose is dead. That kind of main kind of second act thing there, where where it all goes down, around that. I think that the performance, Tom Cruise is utterly convincing, as a kind of um, conflicted person and somebody who does that. But I think the thing for me that really stands out is Goose's wife, and annoyingly, the actor's name escapes me, but
Meg Ryan.
I think it's a great. Thank you. It's a great bit of writing as much as it is a great bit of performance. But where they're in the waiting area, and Maverick walks out, and you expect her to go for him. You killed my husband. You made an orphan of my child. But she doesn't. It's that moment of restraint on the writing, from the writing perspective. But I think it works because of her, and I think it works because of Tom Cruise. That it's so moving. It's so much more moving to have her just say he loved flying with you, and as if to say, I knew this was going to happen. I knew that this was this was inevitable. I accepted it, and he accepted it, and he wouldn't have changed it. And I think it's very, very effective, that moment, I think.
Yeah, well, and isn't it followed up by the like he loved flying, and maybe it's before or after, but her other line is like he would have flown without you too, or something like that.
Yeah.
Isn't that the line? Yeah, so like that, even that is another interesting weighty line that that lands.
Yeah, there's a lot of forward motion in this film, and this look to the future. You have to, and I think they say on a bunch of times, Maverick says a bunch of times, don't think. If if you think up there, then you're dead. And I think that is this kind of instinctual move forward, keep going, don't think, just go on.
Yeah,
which is not the healthiest outlook in the world, but it's an interesting point of view.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I really like that theme, and I think that will come up in our sequel discussion if I'm able to be there, because I think that they carry on with the same themes that this kind of sets up, which is what a lot of people I think are talking about. In terms of a sequel coming out and being just as good, if not better, than its predecessor.
Yeah, I would agree. This film I think stands up and holds its stands. Yeah, I think it stands up to what it was. I think it holds up is what I'm trying to say. In that it's great for what it is, and this isn't a revolutionary movie. This is not The Godfather, for example. This is this is not a one of those movies like no, Godfather in the sky. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
The song, like the soundtrack playing underneath Marlon Brando being like, I never wanted this for my children.
Oh, yeah, that would change that film. But you know what? On that point, it's interesting you mentioned the music at the beginning, because I found the music so distracting in this film. It really bothered me, and in particular, there's one guitar solo which seems to be the only emotional piece of music they have. Like they just go back to it. The moment there's any moment of sadness, they just we'll get the guitar. Yeah, we'll get the guitar. Come on, let's do that. And
yeah.
It's such.
What was that guitar line we had?
I'm pretty sure, doesn't it go like ding ding? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, put that in.
Yeah,
that's great.
There it is.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, very.
I think we've been spoiled by the progression of musical scores.
You might be right.
Yeah.
I think it really, in particular, I think it undercuts some of the tragedy of Goose's death and the subsequent kind of emotional impact of that, because you're just listening to a guitar solo on repeat. And I think if you take that out and rescore it, I think it would be a far more effective moment. And I think if there's a lesson to be taken from this film, it's the importance of music and the importance of kind of timeless score as well. That it is an 80s score, and there are elements of it that work brilliantly, and the inclusion of certain songs and things like that works so well, but it doesn't all. And I think that's
it's almost like watching it, it's like it knew that it was going to be like a timeless score, and that it was going to become so popular. So it's kind of like going back and watching it. It's like the farewell tour of an old rock and roll band that just keeps playing the same song over and over. And you're like, okay, yeah.
I get it. Yeah, that was great. Well done.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's a fun film. It's a fun film. The action set pieces are great. And stand up. I think that the kind of the aerial stuff, I mean, is put to shame by its predecessor, by its sequel. But again, we'll get to that later. But that was always going to happen. It's just the evolution of technology.
Yeah, but I think that you don't have the like how good the second one came out and what they did in terms of production. You don't have that progression without this. So there is a lot of the sequel owes, even story wise, that we'll get into in the sequel, it owes so much to this first one that like without it, it doesn't stand up on its own really. So
yeah, I don't know about that. I think that, and again, this is something we'll play with on when we talk about the sequel. But it does bring us neatly to whether or not this goes into the vaults beneath the aircraft hangar. Well, we can put a Harrier over the top of the aircraft hangar, I suppose. Yeah, we put a jump jet there. Whether or not it belongs in there, and my answer is, I think, gonna be no. I don't think this belongs in the script department vaults.
I would agree. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say I think that for what we are and for what we look for in terms of the writing and things like that, yes, there are some good moments in there, but it's not. The script doesn't come close to where we've been before, and it just doesn't. I just don't think it stands up that strongly. I think like I said, I think it's elevated massively by the performances and the production values. In having said that, though, I don't think it doesn't need to be an amazing script because of those other things, and it still works as a film, and it's thoroughly enjoyable as a film. But I just don't think it would be at home within our hypothetical script department vaults. But I do think the sequel maybe would. And this is one of those times when, and again, later, join us, guys, for that one. But I think that the sequel would stand. I think there's enough development going on there, and there's enough stuff happening in that sequel that film, and also some literal just shots of the first film, to catch you up and to tell that story. I think that if you were to make that film on its own, I think it would stand on its own, and I think you could tell that story on its own without needing to see this one, which is why I feel comfortable not putting this film in there, where I would perhaps, and I'm not saying for definite, but I would perhaps put Top Gun Maverick in there and not this one.
Fair enough. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that, how that without how they stand alone. Because I might kind of disagree with you, but
interesting.
I think it's fair to say that though too. So it requires a little bit more digging, I think. But yeah, no, I would agree as far as this one. Like, it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't do anything too new in terms. If we were a music podcast, yes, probably it would end up, with
or
with all the songs, or like or a Tom Cruise podcast, which I kind of want to do. But yeah, like, yeah, it's just, and I don't think it's trying to do that. It's directed by Tony Scott. I don't remember who wrote it, but
no, I don't have that to hand actually at the moment.
But like, for me, the fact of having Tony Scott directing this, that stands out to me, to, like, because he's, he was a good director, and Ridley Scott's brother. So, but yeah, like, he did some classics that really hold up, in terms of fandom, which this does. But yeah, in terms of screenwriting, I think we've covered it.
I think we have, yeah. Well, brilliant. Thank you, Caleb. Join us again in a little while. We're going to be doing a review later this week for Top Gun Maverick, and you can see Caleb and I fight it out like Iceman and Maverick over whether or not, if we're both there. I don't actually know that we're doing that, but if we are both there, you can see us.
We are now.
We are now, yeah. From either side of the ring, whether or not. Probably be a volleyball pitch, actually, I suppose, wouldn't it? We'll play volleyball for whether or not the sequel stands up on its own. Or not.
Football is in the American football. Sorry,
American.
I have to remember.
American football. You mean just worse rugby?